Okay. Hello, I'm Daniel Popescu. We will discuss about digital transformation. Basically, we will have two sessions today. One is related to Microsoft 365, and another one related to Azure. Azure will be presented by Florin later during this day, but now we will focus on challenges, caveats, risk, what we need to check and what we need to cover during the project for migrating to Microsoft 365. So again, thank you to all our partners for organizing this this event, and we will go directly to migration stages. So, like for any other project, we have different stages, and I try to cover very briefly stages for migration to Microsoft 365. As always, we have a first stage is initiating, and during this phase, we will have to develop, of course, a project charter. So basically, we'll have to use a project management tool in order to put all the steps and everything on a paper to understand who will do what and when, of course, and what are the dependencies between those stages. During this phase, we'll have to cover goals and objectives. We have to understand why we are planning to migrate to Microsoft 365, what we want to achieve at the end of the project or during the next years after the project. We have to build again, of course, the strategy, what will be the timeline, who will be involved, and we'll have to put everything on a stage. From our experience, we have a lot of experience in migrating to Microsoft 365, from Google Cloud, from on-premise solutions, from Zimbra, from Microsoft solutions to Microsoft 365 or Office 365. And during this phase, let's say, during one of our meetings, one of the person involved in that project was, okay, we know who is planning, we know who will lead the project, but we have to know also who will execute all the tasks that we'll have during the project. So this is very, very important during the initial phase and planning. And one of the important things is, of course, the previous experience. Who will, what experience we have in the project during the migration? Who has done this kind of project before? If we have any, let's say, lesson learned from our other similar project, and we have to consider this. We have to plan a workshop. We have, of course, to document the project cost and benefits, to put everything on a paper, all the steps that will be done during the migration, and this document will be a live document. This will have to be adapted during the project. If the project will take months, this project will have several versions, because every time we are changing something or we are doing something, we have to check and we have to update the project. And of course, another important topic is the sponsors and how we are measuring the success for the project. Everything from here should be done during the initiating phase. Then we have the planning phase. The planning phase means that we really have to build the initial documentation for the migration. We have to audit, we have to look on the infrastructure, for instance, what infrastructure we have in place. From where do we migrate? Do we migrate from, let's say, from on-premise solution? Do we migrate from other cloud solutions? Do we migrate from any other, I don't know, from Zimbra or from Microsoft, from Exchange? Everything should be put it on a paper. Why? Because all this information we have to be covered during and we have to associate effort, and we have to sometimes to mitigate some issues when we are migrating. For instance, we have a customer, we have planned, we have migrated, we have started the migration, and during the migration we have noticed that the migration speed is very, very, very low, and the local server, it was a Zimbra server, the local server has blocked. basically. We saw a lot of issues during the migration with the users. We saw some timeouts, and at the beginning we didn't understand why. So we're looking on after several troubleshooting steps, we have noticed that the server during the migration was overloaded. The server was very, very old. It was stuck. And that's why the migration didn't work from time to time. So during the night, we've noticed that the migration worked well. And then during the day, sometimes all the migration has simply stopped without any error, just stop. So it's very, very important to make an assessment of the infrastructure, to make an assessment on the patches, on the operating system, on the server, on the workload. And also, one of the most important things is to look on the limitations for Exchange Online, for example, or for SharePoint, or for Teams, or for OneDrive, to understand if the solution, our existing infrastructure or solution will work in Office 365 for Microsoft 365. So very important to document everything, to look on the details. Then important, we have to look on the network. What means, how is the work on the network? How many locations we have? How is the network map? Is everything going to the central hub and then going to the website? Each, let's say, branches, in case we have some branches, some remote offices have some, let's say, direct connections to internet. And according to this is if, let's say, all the users have access to internet, because I saw some companies where only, let's say, in this case, it was only 300 people that were having access to internet, and the rest of 700 didn't have access to internet. And that's why at that time, a few years ago, they have decided to look to implement an online email server, on-prem email server. So during the Microsoft 365, we have to discuss with the telco in order to configure the network to allow all the users to go to Office 365 and only to Office 365 services, and not to any other, let's say, public website. So this is also one of the important things. Another thing that we have to cover during the planning is to map the users according to the business role. What exactly means is that you have to look and put all the divisions in the companies to understand what are their requirements and to understand what services from Microsoft 365 do they need. After we are doing this, we have to choose the appropriate license. Keep in mind that when we are migrating, or when the customer is buying Microsoft licenses, they can buy, let's say, Microsoft 365 maximum plan E5 for all the users, or they can buy, let's say, only Exchange Online for all the users, or they can make a they can buy, let's say, for part of the people Office 365 E3, for other people can buy only E3 or on E5, E3. For some people, they can only Exchange Online, it's enough. So we have to map according to the business role, according to the business needs. We have to map the appropriate license for each people. It's important to do this during the planning, because during the migration, we will know what workloads and what kind of data we are migrating to each services. We'll see that maybe sometimes, let's say, for some users, they have more emails during they have stored all the emails during their history in the company, and then they are migrating only, let's say, to Exchange Online small plan, and they will not have, let's say, unlimited storage. They'll have only 50 gigs or only 2 gigs for some users. So very important to make and to have a list with the right license for the right people. And here I'm talking not only, we can of course put this on a business role, but we can also put this on a user level. So we depending on the project, depending on the company, we have to approach with we have to have the right approach. And also we have to create a list with all the rights, all the permissions that our colleagues, our people will have in Exchange or in SharePoint or in OneDrive. Keep in mind that when we are migrating to, let's say, to teams, there are only two roles for teams, for each team. One is the owner and the other one is member. So basically all the people that are going to the teams, they'll have all the rights. If they are members, they will have the right and read and write permissions. We don't have any, let's say, drill down permissions for this. So we have to cover and we have to put everything on the paper during the planning phase. And of course, we have to prepare the environment, because during the documentation, we see that we can see that we have to, let's say, install some updates or change some way of doing business for some people in order to have access to Microsoft 365. Maybe we should upgrade the network. As I said before, maybe we should discuss with the internet provider in order to make some settings for the migration and for the next scenario. So we have to prepare this before doing that, doing the actual migration. Of course, after doing the right planning, and we have to allocate a lot of time for planning, and we have to be very careful, we'll start the execution. And we have to migrate and adapt during the migration. That means for any execution, during the execution phase, during the migration, it's better to split, let's say, the migration during phases with pilots. I saw companies that have had 5 pilot phases, then they had let's say the ambassador, and we'll go into details later, and then during the migration for the whole user. So very, very important how we are migrating, how we are monitoring the migration, and how to adapt during the migration. And last but not least, it's good to have a, let's say, a launch event at the end of the migration to announce all the colleagues or employees that we have migrated and we had, let's say, a successful project, hopefully. And the last phase is closing. We have to understand if the migration has done, it works well, and what we have learned during the migration. Very important, because and these are two, we have two divisions, two parts. One is to assess the satisfaction and monitor the migration, the results with the IT and all the people that were involved in the migration. But very, very important is how to obtain the feedback from employees to understand if the migration was successful. So basically, these are the project stages. And we'll go now. I have 2 slides with some challenges during the migration, more precise, let's say, challenges. During the migration, one of the questions is, is it worth it to migrate to Microsoft 365? Why should I migrate? So this is one of the topics that should be covered. We have to build a business reason, because usually this migration will involve a lot of money. And we have to understand if we'll earn something after the implementation. So we have to make a business, we have to build a business reason, some presentation. We have to analyze all the numbers in order to understand if it's worth it to migrate to Microsoft 365. Then another question is, can I do this project entirely with my team? Most of the people and mostly of the customers at the beginning, they are saying, yes, for sure I can do it, because Microsoft is doing a lot of, is giving me a lot of documents, and for sure I can cover all the technical part with my internal team. Well, it's not always real. Why? Because experience from with working with somebody who has done this before shows that you can save a lot of time and, of course, money. One of the customers said during a discussion that he's sure that he can find 10 partners to do the actual migration, the technical migration, but it's quite difficult to find somebody who can cover the, let's say, the training phase for the business and also the communication with the users, because not all the partners are doing. And keep in mind that also the technical part is not always easy. Then during the planning, let's say we are planning to migrate and we have to choose how to migrate. How do we actually migrate? And we have, if we are doing on a Microsoft website, we can find some tools for migrating. We have some tools in Office 365 for migrating, and we can see a lot of things there, and we can do it. And a lot of partners are doing the migration with those tools that are free from Office 365 environment, or with Mover. There are some partners that are using Mover.io for migrating files. I remember that Microsoft have bought this solution, Mover.io, and now you can use this Mover.io for migrating files. So what do we have to use? When should I use Office 365 tools? Is it worth it to use Mover, to migrate with Mover, or why should I use third-party tools? Because third-party tools will have a cost associated, of course. And I have put here BitTitan. Basically, we are using a lot of, in our project, in our latest project, we have used BitTitan. We have used also Skykick. We have used also ShareGate. So it's important to understand if is it worth it or not to use, and why should I use, let's say, BitTitan instead of and buy some licenses and use those services from BitTitan instead of using, let's say, Mover or Office 365 tools. From our experience, by far it's worth it to invest in some money in, let's say, in BitTitan solution, because you will have some savings in terms of time and the effort during the migration. Basically, BitTitan is doing, it's giving you a lot of tools for migrating. You have a lot of tools for monitoring the migration. You will understand exactly where this migration is stuck, and you can also discuss with BitTitan. In our case, we have during the last project we had let's say a direct line with BitTitan, and every time we had some issues, we were raising a ticket to BitTitan, and they were responding and help us for resolving the issue. Just to give you an idea, in case for, let's say, if we are migrating some large files or mailboxes, BitTitan is using behind, it's using some Microsoft data centers, and they are allocating, let's say, some storage, temporary storage for migration. And during this migration, if the files is very, very high, it's huge, or the mailbox, it's also, it has, let's say, 1 or 2 teras, it takes some time, and sometimes that storage can expire and the process is blocked, absolutely blocked. So you have to try again, and you need to understand why the process has stopped. You have to understand, let's say, if you are migrating from Zimbra, you have to understand that the calendar items are not migrated. You have to understand that even from, let's say, when you are migrating from Google Suite, when you can migrate some calendar items, but you have to look very careful on recurring calendars. These are something that you have to check, and you have to be in sync, let's say, with the users, with the people that will be included in the pilot to obtain feedback and to understand what you have to communicate, what you can migrate, and when the migration is not working like it should be, and you have to communicate with the user to announce the user that during the migration you have to check, let's say, the recurring items. One of the important things is that how to control where the data is going, because there are some industries where you have to keep all the data inside European Union region. And by default, BitTitan is using some data centers, let's say, from the entire world, not only from European Union. They also have, during the plane, you have to understand that, let's say, for the BitTitan, again, you can use some data centers that it will keep your data in European Union, and you need to understand how the data is going through during the migration. Because indeed, you have a data center in Germany for BitTitan, for example, so in European Union, and you have to look on this. You have to understand if you should use this data center. Why? Because the price for the BitTitan license for your European Union is higher compared with the regular license where BitTitan is using the entire infrastructure from the worldwide, from the entire world. So this is one of the things that you have to look when choosing. Another one for Mover. Again, I'm coming back to Mover. When we are migrating files from, let's say, local data center or from other cloud provider data center to Microsoft 365, will those data will migrate through, let's say, European Union, through US, or it will stay inside European Union region? So we have discovered that Mover can also migrate the data and keep the data inside European Union with some help from Microsoft. So important also. You have to cover, when choosing the Microsoft tools, you have to look on the speed, how fast each tool is migrating the data. We've noticed, for instance, that BitTitan is migrating with 900 megabytes per hour per user, and you have to understand how fast this can be migrated. Why? Also because during the pilot phase, you will notice that some users can be migrated overnight. Some people some data can be migrated over the weekend, and for some people, some data it will take, let's say, 1 week for migrating all the data. And then you can also start the migration in stages. You can migrate with some third-party tools. You can migrate only, let's say, data from 2020, and you don't have to. And then people can work with those data, and in the background we will migrate the history for the data. So very, very important when choosing the right tool for the right job. We've noticed that, for instance, it's worth it to migrate emails and OneDrive with BitTitan. It's worth it to migrate SharePoint or files that will go to SharePoint with Mover. So very important thing. Then another challenge during the migration, during the planning, is how the internal IT team will migrate. How will manage the Microsoft 365? Because in case we have one tenant, maybe the IT should have access to manage only some users, only for users from some countries or some teams. And in order to do this, you have to maybe you have to implement a third-party tool to have different rights for different tools. Then, of course, the IT enrolls who will do that, who will do and what. Will the employees will be allowed to create teams, will be allowed to create SharePoint website. During the execution, and here I have put a lot of questions, and basically everything can be, or almost everything can be covered with the adoption and communication with the people. How do I know if the migration is working well for my colleagues? And here we can use a Teams, we can use a Yammer tool in order then to create some groups in order to obtain feedback from colleagues. What can I do if something needs to be changed? Again, we are obtaining feedback from the people, from the colleagues, and we can plan, we can communicate to the user that some topics will not be, some items will not be, let's say, migrated, or what to do when they have some challenges. So a lot of questions also during the execution phase. Again, compliance and security, very, very important. Look on the data. Usually the IT is not looking on the compliance. They are looking only they want to be sure, and together with security, they want to be sure that they are migrating everything, but they are not looking on the compliance. What are the compliance requirements according to the industry where the company is working? Then we have to look on who will be involved. The people will be involved in other projects as well, because it's very rarely when the people will allocate time only for that migration project specific, and they will not have to do everything. So we have to look very careful on the time allocated for each project. We have to document all the steps, everything during the migration, absolutely everything. And we have this, as I said, this document should be a live document. And for every test and all the feedback that we are receiving and everything that we are changing, we are moving, we have to update the document. Again, not forget about right license. In case you don't have the right license allocated, some people will not be able to see all the files, and then you have to, there is a possibility to lose some data. You have to look on the shared computers. What happens in if some people are shared by different people, and what kind of license and how it should be configured for those people, for that team. And from our experience, usually allocate the right budget for the right section. From our experience, we've noticed that 1/3 of the budget will be allocated to, will be spent for the technical migration, 1/3 for the training, both for IT and also for the business users, and 1/3 for adoption and communication. It's very important to communicate with the users, to make them aware about the changes, to make them aware about how they can use Microsoft 365 and what are their advantages, to communicate with in the right style for each company. Migrating steps is very, very important, as I said, and choose the right team, the right destination for the file, especially. We have Teams, we have OneDrive, we have SharePoint, we have YAML. When we are migrating, we have to understand what files will go where, exactly according to the business needs and the permissions. During the project, again, very important, adapt feedback, obtain feedback and adapt, and communicate all the time, send communications to the users. And it was very short. I was going to I have a lot of insights. In case you want more details, please contact me. You have all my contact details in an email. So thanks for attending this session, and I will stop now and leave our partners also to continue with their presentation. Thank you and bye.